We left off last video getting our profile view model created and some basic cleanup going on. I forgot to do a major step though. Let's test it. And that's key because you want to be testing along the way of your refactor because like I've mentioned time and time again, and I'll mention many more times, is that you want to be testing every step of the way. That way you know where something broke. If you just refactor a whole bunch of stuff and do 100 steps and then you finally test it and something breaks, it's a lot harder to figure out what you did to break something. So this first step, right, where we created our view model and added our profile view, I'm going to just run it real quick. And I'm not saying you have to test every little element, but just do a general, sanity check, right? So we're going to test this and make sure that our profile view is still loading. And here's a good example of like what I talked about that says you may need to like log in. Remember I mentioned that a couple videos ago. This is the pop-up you'll see. I don't know, it seems to happen to me once a day. I don't know what's up, but just click the settings button. It'll take you into your iCloud. You log in real quick and then come back to dub. So I'm gonna do that off screen. Okay, we're back. Let's click on profile. All right, it took a second, but you see our profile is there. And if you've got a good eye, you'll notice this is a little bit of a different one. Again, it's because I rehearse these videos, practice them to make sure they're all working before I record. And part of this is going to be testing the creation of a new profile. So I created this one, but we'll get there. Just in case you were wondering, hey Sean, why does that look different? That's not the profile we have. Well, that's why. Okay, so we're fine so far on our refactor. And then now that I'm looking at it here on this line, one little thing that I forgot is, a couple people caught it in the comments, so great catch, I appreciate it, is this bio.count less than 100. Well, our UI says, it can be 100 characters. But by having this less than 100, our logic is stating that like the max is 99 characters. So you can see where that could be confusing to the user. And again, it's a simple fix to doing, you can either do less than 101 or you can do less than or equal to 100. So just a small little typo you see can cause a UI bug. So great catch to those in the comments. Add that equal sign right there to fix that. Okay, so let's talk about our CloudKitManager here. So, well, first of all, let's look at these network calls and kind of assess what's going on here, right? So you notice the first step of both of these was to get our user record, right? And to get our user record is a two-step process. We got to go fetch our record ID from the container. Once we have that record ID, now we get the record. Well, we want to do that once and then store the user record in our CloudKitManager. That way we have it, right? We don't have to constantly go back and get it because we're going to be reusing it, a lot. Now, the big picture decision I made to handle this is on launch, we are going to go fetch our user record every time it launches. Another approach could be, why don't we just fetch it once and store it in something like user defaults or the local storage? That way we always have it. And the reason I chose not to do that is, that will work probably 99.9% of the time. However, that will break down if someone ever were to, log out of their iCloud account on their phone and then log into a new one. Basically switching accounts on the phone. I don't know who does that. I've never done that. I don't know. I'm sure people do. You got to account for these kind of things. But the reason I don't want to store this locally in like storage is to handle that, weird edge case. And yes, that would save us a network call, but going and fetching this user record just once on launch, not a big deal to me. I'm fine doing that once, right? It's still 100 times better than making these two network calls to fetch it every time we needed it. And let's discuss real quick these type of decisions because there may be more discussion around what we're going to do with our CloudKitManager. Spoiler alert, we're going to convert it into a singleton. And anytime you say singleton, a lot of people freak out. But the point I want to make here on talking about these kind of decisions is that having the discussion and understanding the trade-offs and being able to, eloquently and reasonably and rationally explain why you made that decision and have a discussion with another engineer is such a valuable skill of being a programmer. So if you do have a different approach or a different opinion on the way I do things, by all means, absolutely leave a comment, have the discussion in the comments. I think that will be very valuable because at least for me, that's when I learned the most about programming is having those discussions with other programmers or even just sitting back and hearing two programmers talk about it and hear their reasoning. Well, I did this and these are the trade-offs I had. Well, I did it this way and here's the trade-offs that I accounted for, right? So in hearing that discussion and maybe there's a compromise in the middle, maybe one way is clearly better than the other, but being able to sit down with your teammates and have those discussions, again, so valuable to you being an asset to the team, but it'll also help you learn. I guess the main thing I want you to take away from this little rant is don't be that engineer that thinks every line of code they write is perfect. Every line of code they write is the perfect, most optimal way to do things. That's absurd. No one does it like that. And I've said it a bunch of times in my courses, I don't claim to write perfect code. I welcome any any comments down in the description that, can slightly tweak things or optimize things, or maybe there's a different approach, because there are so many different ways to do things. Okay, rant over. To sum it up, let's have a discussion in the comments if you have a different approach or a different opinion on the way I handled things. Again, I think the discussion is great. Okay, so what I was saying was the first thing we're going to do is get our user record on launch. And then once we have it on launch, we're going to store it on our CloudKitManager, which will be a singleton. That way we only have to get it once. Once we get it that first time, we have it stored on our CloudKitManager. We can access it whenever we need it. Okay, so first let's set that up. So let's go to our utilities, minimize that, managers, CloudKitManager. Okay, so we're going to convert this to a singleton. So first of all, can't be a struct, right? We need to make it a class. So it's going to be final class CloudKitManager. And a real quick way, at least how I think about it and remember this, is when something is a struct or a value type, I kind of look at it as disposable. So essentially what we were kind of doing when it was a struct, we weren't storing any data on our CloudKitManager, right? Nothing needed to persist. We were essentially using this get locations. So anytime we called it, it was like, hey, create a quick CloudKitManager, get our locations, and then I'm done with it. Get rid of it, get it out of memory. Like it doesn't stay there. It's disposable. You're constantly like using it, get rid of it, use it, get rid of it. Well, now that we want to persist, this user record on here, so we always have access to it, now we don't want to get rid of our CloudKitManager. We need that to stay. So that's where the singleton comes in, and that's why it's a class and not a struct. Because once this gets created, on a session, it will be there for the life of the entire session, which is what we want. And a quick note on singletons, like I said, a lot of people freak out with singletons. Just if you're not familiar with why, to sum it up super simply, I don't want to go into a whole lesson here. Basically, a singleton is kind of like a global variable, meaning it can be accessed from anywhere in the app. So on one hand, that's great convenience, very easy to use. On the other hand, it's kind of dangerous because it's hard to debug, right? Like if it can be accessed and changed from anywhere in the app, look, our app is relatively small to be honest, but you can imagine using a singleton in a huge app, like a Facebook type app where every screen, every class can access it. Whew, it's dangerous, right? A lot of bugs, a lot of errors can happen. So again, use them strategically. They're not bad inherently. I mean, Apple uses them all the time, but you just got to kind of know the pros and cons and when to use them. So I chose to use them for our CloudKitManager. So anyway, we're going to make this a singleton. So the two steps to do that are, one, you have to have a static let shared. You have to have a shared variable that creates a new CloudKitManager. We'll initialize a new one there. So anytime we want to access, get locations or our variable called user record, we're going to have to do CloudKitManager.shared, right? Because it's the shared instance of it. And because of that, we no longer have the static function here. This is just a regular function. So again, we'll do CloudKitManager.shared.getLocations, and that's how we access that. So the last thing we need is the private init, and that's just basically a blank init, and that's what's going on right here. And this essentially means like you can't initialize this CloudKitManager from anywhere else. Basically, it'll be initialized the first time you try to use it. So now that we have that, we need var user record, and that is going to be of type CK record, and that will be an optional. And it's optional because we don't have it right away, right? We're going to make the network call to get it. And then whenever we use it, of course, we'll have to check to make sure we have it, right? By unwrapping the optional. Okay, so now that we have our setup, let's write our get record function that we're going to have on this CloudKitManager. So we'll do func get user record, kind of be specific there, get user record. And in this one in particular, like for all of our other CloudKit stuff, you'll see we have our completion handler where we send back the result. We are going to do that, but however, this get user record is a little bit unique because this is something that gets just called in the background, and we're not really worried about handling the errors. Let me back up and explain to you what the purpose is here and how this is actually going to be used. So this is going to be used on launch. Basically, we're going to fire off get user record. It's going to happen in the background. I'm not going to put up a loading spinner. I'm not going to show errors if something happens bad, because remember, our app, you don't have to be logged in. You don't have to have a user record to see the locations, see who's checked in. Really, the only thing you have to have an iCloud account and a user record for is if you want to create a profile and partake in like checking in and checking out, right? The way we set up our app, if all you want to do is see the locations and see who's checked in where, there's no authentication necessary. So I don't want to block the user, like if they're not even like using that. So that's why this happens in the background. I'm not popping up errors. The way we're going to handle the errors if something bad happened here is if when we try to access our user record, like when the user does try to create a profile and our user record is nil, then we're going to let the user know what's up, handle the errors there. But because this is happening in the background on launch, it's a little bit different of a network call. Again, we're not really handling errors. It happens silently in the background. So what I'm going to do, if I go to my profile view model here, Here we are in the create profile. Well, it's these same two steps, right? How we basically got the record ID and then got the record. So what I'm going to do is copy these one at a time, again, for safety, because you're going to notice I'm going to be missing the bottom curly brace from these, just because everything is like inside of it. So back to CloudKitManager. So the first thing here is, okay, get record ID, and I'm going to add that last curly brace down there, so it's good. Okay, now I want to go back to the profile view model, bring over this where we actually get the record. So copy that. Again, I'm going to be missing my bottom curly brace. Again, this goes inside here because it is a nested network call, which is fine for this particular use case, one that's happening silently in the background. And I am going to keep, I said we weren't going to handle the errors, but I am going to keep this here because essentially what happens in this case is it will print this out. So this is kind of like for developer debugging, right? We're not showing the user this. It's just if something goes wrong while we're developing, we'll see it in the console. That's the whole purpose of that. But now in this kind of nested part here, I have a user record. So the last thing I want to do is self.user record equals user record that we got back right here. So once we get the user record back successfully, again, silently in the background, we set our user record here. Now, one potentially dangerous side effect of doing it like this is, okay, right on launch, we fetch the user record. 99% of the time when they have Wi-Fi or 4G, 5G, whatever, that's going to happen almost instantly. Cool. The downside here is if, let's say they launch it, they're on a horrible network connection that takes 30 seconds to get the user record. And in that time, that 30 seconds while we're still retrieving the user record, they go to the profile screen and try to use their profile, create one, update one. Well, in that case, we won't have the user record back, so we won't be able to retrieve the profile quite yet. But in that edge case, like I said, we will check to see if the user record is nil or not. And if it's nil, we will show them the proper error message and not even make the network call to get the profile record because we can't do that without the user record. So like I said, that is where we are handling the error in this case. And again, these are the structural decisions on like how to handle things, right? That's not necessarily about how to code things. This is more like the art of programming, where, like I said, there could be many different approaches to do this with other trade-offs, and I'm perfectly open to other solutions. Like I said, we're not going to go down that rant again. Handling it this way is a perfect example of how someone could have a different approach. Okay, but this is how we're doing it. So now that we have this get user record function, we actually want to use it. So for that, I'm going to go to my app tab view, right? Remember all this tab stuff here. And then in on appear on this tab view, so we'll do on appear and open up the closure there, CloudKitManager.shared.get user record. And our tab views on appear only fires off once, right? As soon as we launch our app, the tab view shows up, it appears good. And even when you like background the app and bring it to the foreground, on appear doesn't get called again. So I tested that to make sure this was only getting called once, again, so we're not making unnecessary network calls. That is a rule of thumb when it comes to network calls is you don't want to just be making them all willy-nilly, a bunch of them. One, that eats up your user's data potentially, right? You want to be a good citizen of the platform. But two, just a lot of things can go wrong in network calls. You see all the error handling we have to do for network calls. So the more of them you make, the more error handling you have to do. It's just, it's a pain. So I try to limit my network calls as much as I possibly can. Okay, so back to our CloudKitManager here. Let's actually, just for testing purposes, we'll do a print statement here, self.user record. We'll print this out to make sure that we are getting this on launch. Okay, what did I mess up? Command B, I'm missing a, I'm missing a curly brace. Remember I said that was gonna bite me with all that copying and pasting? Okay, so let's run this, and right on launch, we should see the printout of our user record. Well, I messed something up. What did I do? Okay, where's the error? Oh, get locations. Okay, yep, like I said, here's where we're using our CloudKitManager.get locations. Remember I said you have to access it via the shared property? Well, that's what I forgot to do. So like I said, CloudKitManager.shared.get locations. Okay, so that should be good to go. Okay, so here's our launch, right? Just on the map screen, launch, not on the profile. And then I'll bring up here. Yep, here is our user record that we got, right? It's got a reference to a user profile. Here it is. Cool. Okay, so that is working. We are grabbing our user record right on launch here, again, in the app tab view, and that only happens once. So now on the launch of our app, we have our user record. We store it in the CloudKit manager here in this variable, and then we can use it anytime we need the user record, right? We don't got to fetch it every time. And again, we made it optional, so we are going to have to check to make sure we have it whenever we want to use it, but that's fine. Okay, so that's our get user function. We can actually delete this print statement. I don't need that anymore. Now we want to bring over our create profile and get profile and refactor those a bit. So back to our profile view model here. We're just gonna take these one at a time. So create profile, right? We're checking, we're creating our profile record. Cool, okay, we no longer have to get this user record now. So what I do here is I kind of recreate the process. Again, phases, layers, this is how I do things. So what I'm gonna do up here is basically start from scratch and start rewriting this. So I know I need the user record here, right? So like I said, this is where we check for it. Guard, let user record equal CloudKitManager.shared.user record. Cool, but we're unwrapping here, right? So if that's nil, here we're gonna show an alert. We're gonna handle the alerts in error handling in the next video. Show an alert basically saying, hey, we don't have the user record, log in, whatever. We'll give them the proper message and then hit return. So again, this is us grabbing the user record if we have it from our CloudKit manager. So now the next thing I need to do, I no longer need these two like network calls, right? I do need this where we're creating the reference, because again, this is create profile. So copy, paste there, but let's check this here real quick. Yeah, user record, profile record, yep, which is up here, .record ID, cool. And then we're basically changing this, great. Okay, so that line can stay the same. And usually what I do as I kind of go through here is I kind of start commenting this out just as a placeholder. And then now here is where I'm basically doing my batch save. So I'm going to copy and then comment it out and then paste it up here. And this is where your curly braces can get kind of messed up, but we'll come back and fix that. So again, I rewrite this here in a much cleaner way. But now, again, that's just a stepping stone to the next phase, which I know this batch save operation right here, this needs to be refactored out into our CloudKit manager. And if I look here, I know I need to pass in an array of records into my batch save. So into the CloudKit manager, let's start writing this. So again, get user records happens on launch, get locations pretty much happens on launch because it's on the map screen. So in the order of operations of things, create profile would be down here. So function create profile. And like I said, that takes in an array of records. So we'll call it records, which is an array of CK record. And let's write the completion handler here. So completed at escaping. I don't know if I've included my at escaping video here. We're not going to go into that. I've covered that in previous courses, but I will link to a YouTube video on at escaping in case you're not super familiar with that. And that has a results here, which returns. Remember back to the profile view model, right? We're getting back an array of saved records, to verify that we have that. So that's what we need to return here. In the result success case is an array of CK record. And in the result failure case is just an error. Cool. And then this returns void. And again, I like to actually type out void, personal preference. And add a little typo here. I put the comma inside the array. That's not what we wanted to do. I wanted to put the comma after the array. There we go. Do Command B to fix that. Okay, cool. So now that I have the basic structure for this create profile function, or I shouldn't say the basic structure, the function signature to be proper. So back to the profile view model. Again, I know this is all coming out here. So Command X, get that out of there. CloudKit Manager, we're going to paste it into here. And then now we just need to do some tweaks here, right? So one little thing I like to have a space after my function signature. To me, that visually separates them so I can figure out what's going on in the function signature before I get into the logic, just a personal preference style thing. So when I create my operations, my CK modify records operation, I need to pass in records to save. Well, here I'm creating the array of the user record and profile record, but again, I'm just passing that in with my parameter called records up here. So whatever I pass in, we're going to batch save. So I forgot to mention this at the beginning. We're making this batch save reusable. I can pass in any array of records and it's going to save it, right? It's not particular to our user record and our profile record. So operation, records to save records, but this completion handler is still the same, right? I'm getting back an array of saved records or an error. So in the error case, now we want to actually use our completion handler, right? We'll do completed, and then we'll pass back the failure, and then the error is going to be the error we get back. And I'm going to force unwrap that because, like I said, we are basically making sure it's not nil right here. So I know it's not going to be nil when I get there. So here we're in the result, we're passing back the failure case of an error if that happens. So down here, instead of printing records, I actually want to have the completed.success case, and the array of CK records I want to pass back in that success case is the saved records that we get back here and that we're unwrapping right here. And then of course this add operation is what fires it all off. So here quickly we've refactored out our batch save, made it reusable so we can pass in any array of records we want to batch save it into our CloudKit. Again, the basic code didn't really change, except now we're using our completion handler with our result type to pass that back. And on that note, let me show you how that gets used. So in our profile view model, Here's where we just deleted that whole chunk of code. Well, now we would do CloudKitManager dot shared dot, what did I call that? Did I forget to like name it? Oh, okay. Why did I call it create profile? Why didn't you guys tell me I messed that up? It's called batch save. Okay, again, talking and explaining while typing, it's tough. Okay, so we want to call this batch save. And let's go back to the profile view model. CloudKitManager.shared.batch save. There we go. You see it takes in an array of CK record. Well, we'll create that array like we did before of user record and profile record. And then our completion handler here is just a result type. And then in the closure, we switch off of that result type to handle the success case or the failure case. So we'll do switch result. And then as always, do a command B so Xcode can tell me what I need because I don't want to type it. I'm lazy. Okay, so now in the success case, we have access to our array of records, but we don't necessarily need them. So if we did need them, and you'll see we'll use this in a different one, we can do let records. And now we could use that array of records, to do whatever we needed to do. However, because we're not using it, it's fine. I still want access to it just in case I ever need to use it. But in this case, we're not going to use it. But in the success case here, we'll do break because Xcode's going to yell at me if I don't have something in my cases here. But for now, we're just going to do show alert. We will again eventually properly show the alert. But what we're going to show in the success case for creating the profile is profile successfully saved. Yay, congrats. And then they hit OK and done, right? We want to let them know that, hey, this worked. So in the success case, we're showing the alert that's good. And in the failure case, we show an alert letting them know what went wrong. So now all this commented craziness, I have moved out. And the reason I keep it commented is just in case I forget something or something messes up, I can go back and make sure, that's good. Okay, and I know my curly braces are all messed up. I probably just messed it up again. Do a command B, build failed. Yep, I am missing one. Command B. Okay, good to go. So now our create profile function is much more readable, right? Just to review it here, we're checking is valid profile. We're creating a profile record. We're doing a check to make sure we have the user record in the cloud. If we don't, we're returning. We're not even going to make the network call if we don't have the user record. If we do have the user record, cool, we create our reference and then we batch save and then show an alert. So much more manageable than what we had before. Now, before we test it, we're going to fix this Git profile, which is very similar to what we just did. So like I said, I rebuild it as I comment things out when I'm like, I don't want to just yank all this stuff out and forget it. So I rebuild it, right? So again, the first thing we need to do is make sure we have our user record in our CloudKitManager, right? Because if user record is nil, we don't even want to make the Git profile call because we know it's going to fail. We need the user record before we do that. So I'm going to copy this user record check up here. And I know that is the first thing we want to do in Git profile. And again, we'll show an alert if it is false. Okay, we got our user record. We're good. Well, that basically just replaced all this, right? Those two steps. We still need these steps. So I'm going to, again, we'll cut this and then paste it here. Again, like I said, I'm rebuilding it to make sure I don't miss anything. So what we're doing here is we're pulling the reference off the user record, right? We have our user record. Our user record, if a profile has been created, we'll have a reference that points to a user profile. And again, last time we just force unwrapped because we were trying to just get it working. Now we actually want to handle, just in case something happened and user record is nil, we don't want this to crash here. What we want to do is make this a guard let. So guard let profile reference equals that, else. And then here, of course, we will show alert, give me a curly brace, and return. So basically what happens here is if the reference to the profile is nil, that means there's no profile connected. So we know we're not going to be able to retrieve a profile. So very similar case to this where we're just going to return out of it, show them an alert, and we're done, right? We're not even going to make the network call. Okay, but now we know we got a good user record. We know we got a good profile reference. Now we need to create a profile ID from that profile reference. Same thing we did before, right? Here's a profile record ID. Profile reference.record ID has that. Cool. Okay, so we're rebuilding this. So now we're to the point where we're just fetching the record, right? This is the basic convenience API fetch record, right? We're going to be using this a lot. So then what I'm going to do is basically cut this and paste it here. Again, what I just did there, now delete the comments and make sure my curly braces are good. What I just did there was essentially rebuild the function to clean out some stuff. But then that's just one step to get to the next step, which is to refactor out this fetch records function. So in our CloudKitManager, again down here below batch save, we'll do a func fetch record, and you can say with ID, and that is a CK record.id, right? Because anytime you fetch a record, you got to pass in, the record ID. And of course, we do our completion handler. Now, what I do, I've been typing it out just to kind of like show you, but typically what I do is I go up to whatever previous network call, because it is kind of tricky syntax, right? And I just copy and paste it. Now, of course, you got to change your result because we're not getting back an array of CK records here. We're just getting back one CK record. So I'm just saying, when you do that copy and paste just to get all this syntax, make sure you fix that. And then, of course, open up the closure there. Do Command B to make sure everything's copacetic. Okay, so to review the function signature, fetch record with ID, you got to pass in a record ID. On the completion handler, in a success case, we're getting back the record that we fetched. In a failure case, we get back an error. Cool. Back to the profile view model. So I'm going to copy all this because we're going to handle this in the success case. So I still want this on this screen. So I just need this basically syntax here to make the call. So copy into your CloudKitManager. We will paste it there. And I know I'm missing that bottom curly brace. So I'll put it there. Now we're doing CK container.default.public database.fetch with record ID. We're passing in the profile record ID. Well, that was from before. We don't have to do that. We're passing this ID parameter in. So change that to a simple ID. That's all we needed. And then we don't want to call this profile record because we're using this generically anytime we want to fetch any record. So for naming reasons, we're just going to call this the generic record. And then same thing down here, like when we try to unwrap it, right? Guard that record equals record. Because again, this is generic, not unique to the profile ID. Okay, so now we need to handle the success and error cases. So again, instead of printing the error here, we're going to return the failure case. So completed.failure, and then the error we're going to pass in is that error. Same thing we did up there, and we can unwrap it here. So like I said, you could still print out the error here for development reasons. We're going to forego that for now. But that is our failure case being handled. Now we need to handle the success case. So basically, if this guardlet passes, we have a record, we will return that in the success case. So completed.success, you see it takes in a CK record. And if you're not familiar with results, the reason it knows a CK record is because we told it up here, it takes back a CK record. So the record we want to pass back is the record we got here. So cool. So that's a pretty simple function, just fetching a record. Now let's use it in the profile view model. So I will, again, build it here. We're going to delete this eventually, but I want to build this first. So I'll do CloudKitManager.shared.fetch record with ID. And you see I have profile record ID right here. So copy, paste that there. And then in the completion handler, hit return, just type result. Because again, we're going to switch off this result. Do switch result. Again, open and close the curly braces. Command B to have Xcode tell me what I need. Even if it is just a simple success and failure, just I don't want to type. Okay, so in the success case, we got our record back. Now we want to populate the UI, which is what's going on down here. So let's cut and then paste that into the success case. Cool. And now I can delete this here. I wanted to keep that there just for that main chunk. But you see we get an error because we don't have something called profile record, right? Well, remember, like I said, in this case here, if I want access to whatever I got back, I got to do let record, right? Because that's the record. I don't know why I keep putting an E in there. That is the record that we got back. So this record that got returned is what I want to create the profile from, right? Now everything should be good. And we still want to switch to the main thread because we're updating the UI. However, when we show the alert here, show alert and then break because it's going to yell at me. Even when you show an alert, right, we're setting this alert item to the alert context. Well, that's a publish. That's going to trigger a UI update. So that needs to be done on the main thread. So what I want to do is actually put this whole thing on the main thread, this whole switch case. So I'm going to move this closing brace down to here and then cut our switch to the main thread and put the whole switch statement in it. Then now do a Command B, that should be good. Again, trying to manage these curly braces can be tricky. And then I'll do a Command A, Control I to basically line everything up. So let's walk through this real quick. So get profile, again, make sure we got a user record. Once we got a user record, make sure we have a reference to a profile. All that's good, cool. Get our profile record ID from the reference. Now that we got our profile record ID, call CloudKitManager.fetch with that record ID. If we get it back in the success case, cool. Update the UI from that record, we're good. If we get a failure, show the alert. So that is what's going on there. And then back to the CloudKitManager. Again, pretty simple, straightforward fetch record going on there. Okay, now for the final piece of the puzzle, let's test this to make sure it's going good. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna test to make sure we're pulling in the existing profile. Then we're gonna go up on CloudKit, delete that profile, and then create a new one to make sure our creation is going good. And then after we create a new one, we're going to double check to make sure we're still loading that new one. Okay, so let's run it. Okay, go to profile. We should be pulling it in. There we go. Okay, we're pulling it in. Great. Stop it. And now go to the CloudKit dashboard. Okay, here on the dashboard, go to data. Again, make sure you're in the right container if you have a bunch of them like I do. So we are in the grub container. Go to data. And then here we want to query the public database for DDG profile. Hit query records. Here we go. This is the record we have. Sean Allen, YouTube, creator. Cool. Click on the record. Down in the lower right, delete it. It's fine. Cool. No more record. And before I forget, and I caught myself, go to ProfileView. And remember we commented out create profile. Well, maybe you didn't, but I did. So uncomment create profile. And then you'll notice we'll have to do view model.create profile. Do Command B. Okay, so now run it again. And we're going to create a profile real quick just to make sure that's all working. Okay, go to profile. We're not pulling anything in because the profile doesn't exist. Great. So let's start creating this. Okay, I'll go back to the old grub logo because remember it was white with the red. Just make sure we have something different. Sean Allen, company name, my company. Again, just making it somewhat different, just to make sure we have that one. Okay, create profile. Here in a future video, we're gonna make a loading spinner. Once that is successful, we'll pop up the pop-up that says, yay, successfully created your profile. And then that way the user knows they're good. Because right now you just saw the user experience. I tap the button and you're like, did anything happen? Like, I don't know. So we definitely wanna let them know what's up. Okay, so stop running this and then back to CloudKitManager to make sure that new record is up there. Okay, so we will query again. Okay, so now we have a record. If you click on it, I don't want that view, I want this view. Yep, Sean Allen, my company, somewhat different. That's what we just put up there. Great, back to Xcode. Now that we've stopped running it, if we run it one more time, now it should fetch the profile and it should populate what we have. Okay, over to profile. There we go, it fetched the new profile. Okay, so we didn't build anything like new, but the refactor, we know we didn't break anything. Everything is working properly. So that was the revamp of the CloudKitManager, right? We made it a singleton. If I go back to it just for a quick review, we made it a singleton here. Now we're storing our user record. That way we don't have to fetch it all the time. And I told you the reasoning behind why I chose to fetch it once on launch and not have it like saved locally. We talked about that. And then we basically refactored out the batch save, made it generic. So we can batch save any array of records now with this function. And then we made our fetch record generic. So we can just fetch any record, which we're gonna be doing a lot of. And then back to our profile view model, right? We basically refactored this create profile to be much cleaner and shorter, and same thing with our get profile here. Okay, now let's move on to our alerts and our loading screen.